My mom died of cancer, leaving behind a mountain of debt. My dad never remarried. To help him pay off every cent, I gave up my dream of going to college and worked myself to the bone. I never expected that years later at a theme park, my dad and I would see her again. My mom, who was supposed to be long dead, was happily strolling with her first love and their child. It turned out she had faked her death just to elope with another man. My dad was devastated and went to confront her, only to be murdered by her and her lover. They didn't let me live either. When I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day she supposedly died. After the doctor declared my mother dead, my dad collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I remained eerily calm, my eyes fixed on my mother's attending physician, Dr. Strolling. She wore a mask of professional grief. "I'm so sorry for your loss. There was nothing more we could do. You should start making the funeral arrangements." Dr. Strolling. My mom was doing fine yesterday. How could she just drop dead today? I suddenly spoke up. Dr. Strolling froze for a second before quickly recovering. Cancer is a ticking time bomb. Sudden death is very common in patients like her. The charts and test results are all there. I showed them to you earlier. Her reaction confirmed my suspicions. She was definitely the one, helping my mother pull off this scam. In my past life, my mother faked her death from cancer, and a massive pile of debt for my father and me. We spent 10 agonizing years working our lives away to pay it off. On the day we finally cleared the debt, we saw her at a theme park. She wasn't dead at all. She had faked the whole thing to run away with her high school sweetheart. They even had a kid together and had been living a life of luxury for a decade. Meanwhile, my dad and I were kept in the dark, living like paupers just to settle her bills. And in the end, they killed us to keep their secret. The hatred burned in my chest. I felt like I was drowning in it. In this life, I won't let anyone who hurt us get away with it. Just you wait. I don't believe she died this quickly. Something is wrong. I raised my voice, drawing the attention of everyone in the ward. Dr. Sterling's face turned the sickly shade of pale. "Don't talk nonsense. We have a death certificate right here. Besides, your mother is already in the morgue. You can go check if you don't believe me." My dad wiped his tears and grabbed my arm. "Ethan, your mom is gone. I know you're hurting, but we have to be reasonable." I saw the reports myself. It really was the cancer. I wanted to scream at him that I wasn't sad at all, but it wasn't time to reveal the truth yet. I looked at him. "Dad, how can you be sure those reports weren't forged? I don't buy it. If it wasn't cancer, it was medical malpractice." Calling the police and requesting an autopsy. The word autopsy made Dr. Sterling's face go white. She gritted her teeth. "Young man, watch what you say. This is a top-tier hospital. Malpractice is impossible here. Is that so?" I stared her down. "If this hospital is so prestigious, then you shouldn't be afraid of an autopsy." I pulled out my phone to dial 911. Dr. Sterling panicked and snatched the phone right out of my hand. "You can't call the police." Wow. She was really losing it. I tilted my head and smirked. "And why not, Dr. Sterling? You're so desperate to stop me. Now I have even more reason to suspect you're covering something up." My dad seemed to finally catch on. Something about her behavior didn't sit right with him. "Ethan is right. You're acting very strange. I'll call him myself." Before she could stop him, my dad pulled out his phone and made the call. Dr. Sterling tried to block him, but it was too late. I was genuinely curious to see how they would keep this lie going. Once the forensic team showed up, the police station was close, so officers arrived within minutes. After I explained the situation, the police informed us that we had every right to request an autopsy. They handed us a form for the next of kin to sign. Dr. Sterling stood to the side, but beating on her forehead, she was still trying to talk her way out of it. "Officer, I'm a professional. There's no way I made a mistake." The officer patted her shoulder. "Don't worry. Once the autopsy is done, the truth will come out." Dr. Sterling looked like she was about to faint. My dad was still crying, his voice thick with grief. "Thank you, officer. Please, we just need to know what happened. I can't let my wife go without knowing the truth." My dad loved her so much. He had spent his whole life providing for her. Back when they got married, he was like a loyal dog, worshipping the ground she walked on. That's why in my previous life, finding out the truth destroyed him. He couldn't handle the betrayal. The coroner led us toward the morgue, putting on a mask and grabbing his kit. I felt a surge of dark excitement. Couldn't wait to see how my mother would keep playing dead. When the scalpel came out, "Wait, don't go in there." Dr. Sterling suddenly lunged forward, blocking the coroner's path. The coroner frowned. "Please step aside. I have a job to do," Dr. Sterling stammered. I just think it's disrespectful to the deceased. She just passed away. Cutting her open so soon is wrong. Dr. Sterling, we're the family, and we don't mind. Why are you so worked up? I don't consent to an autopsy. A sharp, angry voice cut me off. I turned around to see my grandmother, Martha, marching down the hall. A handsome man was holding her arm. I instinctively took a step back. I recognized him instantly. He was the man my mother eloped with in my past life. Sebastian Thorne. Robert. I'm not dead yet. Since when do you make the big decisions in this family? Martha glared at my father with pure venom. My dad pulled me behind him and lowered his head. I'm sorry, Martha, but this is urgent. We suspect there might have been a medical error. Robert, this is a world-class hospital. The attending physician is a close friend of mine. His skills are famous in the city. There's no way there was an error. Sebastian spoke up, his eyes cold as he stared at us. There wasn't a hint of kindness in his gaze.
Great.
They brought in Grandma to stop the autopsy. I pushed past my dad and looked Martha in the eye. Grandma, Dr. Sterling is definitely hiding something. She looked terrified when I mentioned the autopsy. And this guy just admitted he's friends with the doctor. They're obviously in on it together. Don't you want to know how your own daughter died? An autopsy will settle everything. You brat.
How dare you?
Sebastian snapped. Your mother and I grew up together. I loved her dearly. Why would I ever hurt her? Martha didn't budge. She kept that same hateful expression. You heartless little monster. Your mother is dead. And you want to butcher her body instead of letting her rest in peace. I'm telling you right now, my daughter will be buried whole and untouched. She raised her cane as if to strike me. I was fast enough to dodge it. My dad rushed in to defend me. Martha, Ethan didn't mean it like that. He's just upset and wants answers. Martha didn't listen to a word. She just kept repeating the same thing. No autopsy. I saw a flash of triumph in Sebastian's eyes and it clicked. Martha was protecting him. Does that mean she knows Mom is faking it, too? In my last life, right after Mom died, Martha, coincidentally, went abroad for medical treatment and never came back. The whole damn family was in on the scam against my dad and me. I grabbed my dad's arm. It's okay, Dad. If Grandma says no, then we won't do it. Maybe I really did misjudge Dr. Sterling. The tension in the doctor's shoulders visibly snapped. She let out a huge sigh of relief. I'm glad you've come to your senses, Ethan. I never hurt your mother. I ignored her and looked at Martha. Grandma, you're right. She should be buried whole. Let's take her back to the old family estate in the countryside and bury her there immediately. As soon as I said that, Martha and Sebastian both turned pale. No, that's not a good idea. Martha stammered. I narrowed my eyes. Why not? Don't you want her buried properly?
But you just said fine.
Sebastian interrupted, glancing at Martha. Ethan has a point. We should take Vanessa's body back home for the burial. We took my mother's body the entire way. I insisted on sitting in the back of the transport van to keep watch over her. Nobody could talk me out of it, so they had to let me. I could see Sebastian's jaw clenching so hard. It looked like his teeth might shatter. He probably planned to let my mom out of the casket somewhere along the road, but I wasn't going to give them a chance. He thought he was the only smart person in the room, but he had no idea what was coming. I looked at my mom lying next to me. Her eyes were shut tight, and her skin was pale. She looked dead, but I could clearly see the slight movement of her nostrils. She was breathing.
Mom,
just you wait. I'm going to peel back your lies one by one. Once we reached the house, I insisted that we couldn't bury her right away. I said we needed to keep her in a refrigerated casket in the living room for a few days, while we prayed for her soul. Martha and Sebastian looked like they wanted to scream. We can't do that, Sebastian said. I glared at him. I thought you were so close to her. Don't you want her soul to find peace? I shut him down completely. He had to follow my lead. I watched with a hidden smile. As my mother was lifted into the freezing casket, I laughed internally. Oh, Mom, you're going to suffer for this. It's the middle of winter. I wonder how cold it is in there. That night, everyone fell asleep in the living room. I pretended to doze off on the sofa. A little while later, I heard the lid of the casket creak open. Then came Sebastian's worried whisper. Vanessa, are you freezing? Come out quick. I'll put the mannequin in. My mother's voice was literally shivering. I'm dying in there. It's so cold. I've been holding it in all day. I swear that Brad is doing this on purpose. I curled my lip into a smile. Keep talking, Mom. My phone was hidden nearby, recording every word and every movement between her and Sebastian. Soon I'd show the whole world this little performance. Finally, the day of the funeral arrived. I decided to go live on TikTok. I cried my eyes out in front of the camera. Today is my mom's funeral. I'm devastated. But she loved a good crowd. I want my followers to help me say goodbye to her. I had a decent following of a few 100,000 from my singing videos. So the viewers started pouring in immediately. The pallbearers brought the casket out. My dad's eyes were swollen from crying so much. Martha and Sebastian, however, didn't look sad at all. They thought they had swapped my mom out and were about to start their new life. While my dad and I paid their debts. Not a chance. I'm not tripping over the same stone twice. As the casket was about to be lowered into the grave, I propped my phone up on the ground to capture everything. I lunged forward and hugged the cat, wailing like my heart was breaking. Mom, I can't let you go.
I need to see you one last time.
My dad started crying even harder and joined me clutching the wood. I want to see her too. Just one last look, Martha screamed.
She's dead.
What is there to see? Just bury her already. But I refused to let go. No, I need to see my mother. Won't let you stop me. Sebastian tried to play the good guy. Since force wasn't working, he came over and tried to pull me away. Ethan, I know you're hurting, kid, but there are rules for burials. Once the lid is closed, it stays closed.
Damn.
I underestimated how persistent he could be. He was trying to use tradition to shut me up, but I had plenty of ways to deal with him. I literally jumped into the grave pit, leaning against the casket. If I don't see her, nobody is burying anything today. My dad might be a bit of a pushover when it came to love, but in this moment, he was the perfect partner in crime. He knelt down and begged Martha, please. She was my wife. Let us say goodbye properly. Martha looked at him with nothing but coldness. No guards pulled him away. I knew this would happen. That's why I had already called the local news stations. Right on cue, a group of reporters burst into the cemetery. They shoved microphones in Martha's face. It's natural for a son to want to see his mother. Why are you so determined to keep this casket closed, ma'am?
Exactly. It's such a small request.
Why won't you let them have closure? She was your daughter. Don't you want to see her face one last time? The reporters were relentless, filming Martha as she started to fumble. Sebastian, help me, she shrieked. The reporters immediately swarmed Sebastian. What is your relationship to the deceased? Why is she asking you for help? Are you her son-in-law? Then who is the man crying by the grave? Sebastian's face turned stiff. I'm a family friend. We have traditions here. We don't open caskets once they are sealed. Your traditions. One reporter raised her voice. You're not her husband. Why should your traditions matter over the family's wishes? Good one. I almost wanted to clap, while Martha and Sebastian were distracted by the media circus. I seized the moment. I shoved the lid open with all my might. Where did my mom go? I screamed in fake horror. The air in the cemetery went dead silent, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the wind rustling through the bare autumn trees. My voice echoed across the open gravesite, shrill and sharp, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a straight razor. Where did my mom go? I pushed the casket lid entirely off its tracks. It tipped sideways, slamming into the dirt with a heavy, hollow thud. Inside lay not the pale, lifeless body of Vanessa, but a poorly dressed fiberglass mannequin, its bald plastic head tilted at an awkward angle, draped in one of my mother's old floral dresses. Bags of play sand were taped around its torso to mimic the weight of a human
Corpse.
For 2 full seconds, nobody breathed. Then, the storm erupted. The flashbulbs of the reporters' cameras exploded in a blinding rhythm.
The
camera propped on the grass, still broadcasting live to over 200,000 viewers on TikTok, was flooded with comments so fast the screen blurred into a frantic streak of white text. Is that a dummy? What the actual F**********, she faked her death. Call the police. My father stared into the open box. His face didn't turn red. It drained of all color until he looked more ghost than man. He reached out with trembling, dirt-stained fingers, touching the cold plastic face of the mannequin.
He
pinched the dress, feeling the coarse plastic sack of sand hidden beneath the fabric. Vanessa? He whispered. His voice was small, crushed, like the sound of dry leaves being ground underfoot. Where's she? Sebastian Thorne snapped first. His aristocratic composure cracked wide open.
He
lunged toward my phone sitting on the grass, aiming to kick it or smash it beneath his leather boot. Turn that damn thing off, he roared, his voice losing every trace of smooth, refined charm. I was faster. I threw my body across the mound of dirt, grabbing my phone and holding it high, keeping the lens pointed straight at his face. Why, Sebastian? So you can hide the fact that you helped my mother fake her death. You hysterical little brat. Grandma Martha shrieked, her voice cracking into a high-pitched scrape. She raised her heavy wooden cane, swinging it wild and blind toward my head. Don't touch my son. It wasn't me who blocked the blow. It was my father. For 10 years in my past life, Robert had been a rug for these people to wipe their muddy boots on. He had bowed his head to Martha's insults, slaved 80 hours a week to pay off debts that weren't his, and let his spirit be ground into dust. But something in him snapped the moment he touched that sandbag. He caught the heavy cane in his bare palm. The impact made a sharp crack, but he didn't flinch. His hand wrapped around the wood, knuckles turning chalk white. He glared up at his mother-in-law, his bloodshot eyes wide, unblinking, filled with a terrifying mix of grief and absolute rage. "Where is my wife, Martha?" Dad growled. His voice vibrated deep in his chest. "Where is she?" She's, Martha stammered, stumbling backward, her eyes darting toward the reporters who were closing in like vultures. "Miss, is it true your daughter faked her death?" A female reporter shoved a foam-covered microphone into Martha's face. "Are you complicit in body swapping?" "Sir," another journalist shouted at Sebastian. "What is your relationship with Vanessa? Why did you help facilitate a fraudulent burial?" Sebastian slammed his hand over the news lens. "Get those cameras out of my
Face.
This is a private family matter. The hospital made a mistake."
It was a
"Mix-up at the morgue." "A mix-up?" I yelled, stepping right into the middle of the camera frame, holding my phone high so the live stream saw every detail. "A mix-up where?" "Someone went out of their way to dress a mannequin in my mother's clothes and weigh it down with 50 pounds of sand. A mix-up that Dr. Strolling at St. Jude Hospital tried so hard to hide by refusing an autopsy." The live stream chat erupted into an absolute bonfire. "St. Jude Hospital? Dr. Sterling? Look at his face. He's guilty as hell. The kid is right. This is a scam." Right on cue, sirens wailed in the distance. I had called the local police station 20 minutes before we even left for the cemetery, telling them there was an ongoing attempt to tamper with evidence regarding a high-value fraud case. 2 squad cars bounced over the gravel path of the cemetery, their red and blue lights painting the headstones in violent shades of purple. When the officer stepped out, the head of the local precinct, Detective Miller, took one look at the overturned casket, the plastic mannequin, and the horde of frantic news reporters, and his eyes went hard. "Nobody leaves," Miller commanded, unclipping the holster at his hip. "Secure the perimeter." Sebastian tried to back away toward his slick black Mercedes parked down the lane, but 2 officers immediately stepped into his path, blocking him off. "Officer, this is a misunderstanding," Sebastian said, slicking his hair back, trying to force a professional smile. "I am Sebastian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Logistics. I was simply here supporting my friend's mother." "Save it." Detective Miller cut him off coldly. He walked over to the casket, peered inside, and nudged the sandbag with the tip of his pen. He turned to look at my father and me. "Who was in charge of transport?" "Dr. Sterling released the body from St. Jude's." I spoke up clearly, stepping forward. "And last night, my mother's body was kept in a refrigerated casket at our old home. My grandmother Martha and Mr. Thorne insisted on staying overnight to guard her." I pulled out my phone, unlocked a secondary drive, and played the screen for Detective Miller. It was the night vision video from my hidden camera. The audio wasn't loud, but in the silence of the cemetery, every word came through crystal clear. "Vanessa, are you freezing? Come out quick. I'll put the mannequin in.
I'm
Dying in there. It's so cold. I swear that brat is doing this on purpose." Martha's face went from pale to gray. Sebastian's jaw twitched violently. My father listened to his wife's recorded voice, the light, airy voice he had adored for 20 years, complaining about the cold while planning to abandon him to a mountain of fake debt. Dad didn't cry this time. He didn't drop to his knees. He just stared at Sebastian, his chest heaving, his hands curling into tight, lethal fists. "You took her," Dad said softly. "You took my wife. And she helped you." "Robert, listen to me," Martha began, her voice shrill and desperate. "Shut up," Dad said. It was the first time in his life he had ever raised his voice to her. "Shut your mouth, Martha." Detective Miller clicked his handcuffs off his belt. The metallic snap echoed clearly across the lawn. "Sebastian Thorne, Martha Vance. You are being detained under suspicion of obstruction of justice, desecration of a corpse, and grand fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As the steel cuffs clicked around Sebastian's wrists, his arrogant demeanor
Shattered.
"You're making a mistake. My lawyers will have you stripped of your badge," he screamed, struggling against the officer pushing him into the back of the cruiser. Martha was sobbing loudly, trying to play the weak, frail old woman, but the police officers didn't fall for it. They escorted her away as the news cameras captured every single second of their disgrace. I stood beside my father, watching the squad cars pull away. This was only the first blow. Faking a death was a crime, yes, but it wasn't enough to burn them to ashes. In my past life, they didn't just break our hearts. They stole our lives, stole my future, and eventually murdered us in cold blood. I looked down at my hands. They weren't shaking. "Ethan," my dad whispered, staring at the empty grave. "What do we do now?" I turned to him, gripping his shoulder with all the strength a 17-year-old could muster. "Now, Dad," I said, my voice ice cold, "we go tear down everything they built." Within 3 hours, the story of the mannequin funeral was the #1 trending topic across the entire country. The live stream clip I had broadcasted hit 12 million views by mid-afternoon. News anchors on every major channel were talking about the wild story out of St. Jude Hospital, a wealthy high society man, a corrupt doctor, and a mother who faked terminal cancer to abandon her family. While the internet burned, I sat in the living room of our cramped, rented apartment, sitting across from our family lawyer, Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was an old, cheap attorney my dad had used years ago for basic tax filings. He looked terrified just reading the headlines on his tablet. "Ethan, Robert, this is unprecedented," Arthur muttered, wiping sweat from his thick brow. "The police have secured a warrant for St. Jude Hospital. They're seizing Dr. Sterling's records right now. But if Vanessa really faked her death, why? What was the financial angle?" "The debt," Dad said. His voice was hollow. He sat on the edge of the sofa, staring at a stack of medical bills sitting on the coffee table. The $300,000 in uncovered cancer treatments. The loan shark she said she had to borrow from for experimental drugs in Switzerland. I leaned forward, grabbing the stack of bills. "Look at the routing numbers on these payment receipts, Mr. Pendleton." Arthur put on his reading glasses and leaned in. I pointed my finger at the bottom of the invoices provided by Dr. Sterling. "In my mother's treatment plan, every single check my father signed was deposited into an intermediary company called Apex Medical Solutions," I explained. I had spent hours in my past life, during those agonizing 10 years of slaving away, memorizing the names of the debt collectors who bled us dry.
Back.
Then I thought they were legitimate. Now I knew better. Search Apex Medical Solutions on the corporate registry. Arthur tapped rapidly on his laptop keyboard. A few seconds later, his eyes went wide behind his thick lenses. "My God," Arthur breathed. "Apex Medical Solutions isn't a medical supplier. It's an offshore shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, and the sole signatory director listed on the shell incorporation documents is Sebastian Thorne." I finished his sentence. Dad stood up, so fast his chair screeched against the linoleum floor. "She didn't just leave," he gasped, his eyes wild with horrific realization.
"She was
stealing from us. She was taking the money I earned, the money we borrowed from my brothers, the money we remortgaged the house for, and feeding it straight into his pocket. And Dr. Sterling was taking a cut to falsify the medical charts," I added
coldly.
"Mom didn't have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She probably had a cold. Sterling used fake x-rays and forged blood work to make us believe she was dying, driving my dad into despair so he wouldn't question where the money was going. It's financial fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering," Arthur said, his tone shifting from bewildered to terrified excitement. "If we take this to the district attorney, this isn't just a civil suit, Ethan. This is federal crime territory." Before Arthur could finish, my phone buzzed on the glass table. It was an unknown number. I set it to speaker and hit answer. "Is this Ethan?" A frantic, sharp female voice came through the speaker.
It was
Dr. Sterling. She sounded hysterical, her breath ragged, the background filled with the sound of rustling paper and slamming drawers. "Dr. Sterling," I said calmly, "how is the medical profession treating you today?" "You little bastard," she spat, sobbing hysterically. "The police are outside my office. Board inspectors are revoking my license. Do you have any idea what you've done? You ruined my life." You ruined your own life when you took bribes to sign a fake death certificate, I replied, my tone flat, lacking a single shred of mercy.
Where?
Is my mother, Sterling? I don't know. I swear to God I don't know, she shrieked. Sebastian took her. Straight from the morgue transfer yesterday. They were supposed to leave the
country tonight.
He told me he had a charter flight booked for South America. My eyes snapped to the clock on the wall. 4:15 p.m. What airport? I demanded. A private airfield in Westford. Flight 402. That's all I know. Please tell the police I cooperated. Tell them I was forced into this by Sebastian. I hung up on her without another word. I turned to my dad. He was already reaching for his jacket, his face set in hard, rigid lines. The weak, soft-hearted man who used to apologize for taking up space was gone. In his place was a man who had seen his entire life reduced to a cruel joke and was ready to tear down the circus. Westford Airfield, Dad said. That's an hour away. We aren't going alone, I said, pulling out my phone again and dialing Detective Miller's direct line. And we aren't letting them take a single step onto that plane. The sky had turned a bruised, ugly shade of purple by the time we reached the perimeter fence of Westford Private Airfield. Rain had begun to fall, a steady, freezing drizzle that made the asphalt slick and dark. Detective Miller's unmarked sedan was parked in the shadow of a maintenance hangar, flanked by two state trooper cruisers with their emergency lights turned off to avoid alerting the target. Miller stepped out into the rain, pulling his collar up around his neck as Dad and I walked over. You were right about the flight manifest, Miller said, nodding toward the brightly lit runway a few hundred yards away. A twin-engine Gulfstream, registered to a holding firm tied to Thorn Logistics, just filed an emergency flight plan for Nassau. They're refueling right now. Are they on board? I asked, squinting through the downpour. Through the blur of rain, I could see a sleek white private jet idling on the tarmac. A black SUV was backed right up to the boarding stairs. Ground crew says 2 passengers boarded 10 minutes ago, Miller said.
A man.
Matching Sebastian Thorne's description, and a woman wearing a heavy wig and dark sunglasses. They bribed the airfield manager to bypass security control. My dad stepped forward, his boots squelching in the wet gravel. Is Sebastian out on bail already? His lawyers posted a $200,000 cash bond within an hour of his arrest, Miller said, shaking his head with deep disgust. Money talks.
He
was supposed to surrender his passport, but he clearly kept a duplicate. If that plane takes off and hits international airspace, extraditing them will take years. Then don't let it take off, Dad said. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Miller looked at my dad, seeing the raw, unadulterated pain in the man's eyes. Then he looked at me, a 17-year-old kid who had been forced to grow up. Overnight. We move in, Miller ordered into a shoulder radio. Block the taxiway. Nobody gets airborne tonight. The police cruisers hit their sirens, blue and red strobes cutting through the dark rain as they accelerated onto the tarmac, tires screaming against the wet concrete. Dad and I ran right behind Miller's car. The jet's engines were winding up, producing a high-pitched, deafening whine that vibrated through my chest. The boarding stairs were just beginning to retract when the lead police cruiser swerved directly in front of the aircraft's nose wheel, cutting off its path completely. Police. Shut down the engines. Step out of the aircraft with your hands visible. Miller's voice boomed over a megaphone. For a long, agonizing 10 seconds, the jet engines continued to roar, threatening to roll right over the police car. The pilot was clearly panicking. But then, with a long, whining hiss, the turbines spun down, and silence settled over the runway, broken only by the sound of falling rain and police sirens. The hydraulic door of the plane creaked open. Sebastian Thorne stepped out onto the top stair. He wore a sharp camel hair coat, but he looked completely unraveled. His hair was messy, his necktie was loosened, and his eyes were bloodshot with panic. What is the meaning of this? Sebastian screamed down at the officers, trying to summon his usual authority. I am a private citizen on a private flight. This is illegal harassment. Get down here, Thorne, Miller yelled back, drawing his sidearm and aiming it straight at Sebastian's chest. Your bail is revoked. You violated your release conditions by attempting to flee the country. From behind Sebastian, inside the warm, leather-upholstered cabin of the luxury jet, a woman stepped out into the rain. She wore a bright red coat, dark sunglasses, and a silk scarf tied over a blonde wig. But I would recognize that posture anywhere. It was my mother, Vanessa. She looked alive. She looked healthy. Her skin wasn't gray. Her cheeks weren't sunken. She looked like a woman who had just spent the last 6 months resting at a spa, not a patient who had suffered through stage 4 cancer. When her eyes swept across the tarmac and landed on my father, she froze. Dad walked past the police officers, stepping directly into the glare of the cruiser's headlights. Rain soaked through his thin jacket, plastering his hair to his forehead. He stopped at the foot of the air stairs, looking up at the woman he had loved for 23 years. "Vanessa," Dad called out. His voice didn't shake. It was heavy like lead. Vanessa pulled her sunglasses down, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Robert. You look good," Dad said, a bitter, tragic smile touching his lips. "For a dead woman, you look remarkably well." "Robert, please," Vanessa stammered, taking a tiny step backward toward the cabin. "You don't understand. I had to." "You had to what?" Dad roared, his voice deafening, drowning out the patter of the rain. "You had to pretend to die. You had to leave me and Ethan with $300,000 of fake debt. You had to watch me cry my eyes out over an empty casket. It wasn't supposed to be like this," Vanessa cried, tears spilling over her cheeks, smearing her makeup. "Sebastian loved me. He offered me a life where I didn't have to live in that pathetic, cheap little house, where I didn't have to watch you struggle every single day to make ends meet. I was miserable, Robert. I was dying inside living with you." The truth hit the air like poison gas. Dad stood there, taking the words right in the chest. In our past life, he had died believing she was an innocent angel who had been taken too soon. He had spent 10 years blaming himself for not earning enough money to save her. Hearing her say those words, with her own mouth shattered the last remaining scrap of illusion he held. "You were miserable?"
Dad said softly.
He let out a dark, dry laugh. "I worked 3 jobs for you, Vanessa. I didn't buy myself a new pair of shoes for 6 years so you could have designer handbags. I loved you." "Love doesn't pay for luxury, Robert," Sebastian yelled from the top of the stairs, pulling Vanessa behind him. "Look at you. You're a nobody, a low-level accountant living in the gutter. Vanessa belongs with someone who can actually give her the world. She belongs in a state penitentiary," I shouted, stepping up beside my father. Vanessa's eyes locked onto me. For a second, a flicker of motherly instinct seemed to cross her face, replaced instantly by cold, ugly panic. "Ethan, my baby, please tell your father to let us go. I did this for us. I was going to send for you once we settled in Nassau." "Liar." I cut her off, my voice sharp as a shattered mirror. "You were never
Going to send for me.
In fact, if we ever ran into you again, you'd probably prefer we were dead. Just like you killed us at the theme park," I added silently in my heart. "Step down off those stairs. Both of you. Hands above your heads."
Detective
Miller commanded, moving forward with 3 armed officers. Sebastian looked around wildly, realizing there was no escape. The airfield was surrounded. The plane was grounded. His money couldn't buy a way out of this trap. With a pathetic, trembling sob, Vanessa lowered herself down the metal stairs, stepping right into the freezing rain. The moment her boots hit the tarmac, an officer grabbed her wrists and snapped steel handcuffs around them. "Get your filthy hands off me," she shrieked, kicking wildly. "Robert,
Tell them to stop.
you love me. You can't let them do this to me." My dad looked at her as the metal cuffs bit into her wrists. He didn't move. He didn't blink. "I loved my wife," Dad said, his voice flat and stone cold. "But my wife died in that hospital. You're just a stranger stealing her face." Dad turned his back on her, walking away into the darkness before the police led them to the squad cars. The arrest at the airfield made national headlines by morning. The scandal was too monstrous for the public to ignore. The combination of medical corruption, faked deaths, high society betrayal, and a teenager catching it all on a viral live stream turned our family into the center of the country's attention. Dr. Strolling was arrested at her home at 6 a.m., dragged out in her pajamas, while news crews filmed her weeping into her hands.
To save herself from a
30-year sentence for racketeering and medical forgery, she sang like a bird, giving the police every recorded conversation, text message, and offshore ledger Sebastian had ever given her. By afternoon, the full picture of their scheme was exposed on national television. Sebastian Thorne's logistics firm was actually heavily bankrupt due to failed investments in illegal overseas shipping. Desperate for capital, Sebastian had reconnected with his high school sweetheart, my mother, 2 years ago. Together, they devised a plan. Vanessa would use my father's pristine credit score and our family home to rack up massive loans, funnel the cash through Dr. Sterling's fake medical supplier, and transfer it to Sebastian's offshore accounts to cover his corporate debts. Once the money was drained, Vanessa would die, leaving my father legally obligated to pay off the remaining balance while she slipped away to live as a wealthy woman in the Caribbean. It was a perfect, merciless parasite scheme, and it would have worked just like it did in my past life if I hadn't come back from the dead. Sitting in our small apartment 3 days later, my dad sat at the kitchen table surrounded by documents sent over by the district attorney's office. Because the entire debt scheme was proven to be fraudulent, the court issued an emergency freeze on all collection attempts against my father. The bank released the lien on our home. The $300,000 of debt vanished into thin air, transferred entirely into criminal restitution claims against Sebastian Thorne's seized assets. It's over, Dad whispered, staring at an official letter stamped debt cancelled. It's all gone. Not all of it, I said, sliding a thick folder toward him. We still have Grandma Martha to deal with. Dad looked up, a shadow crossing his face. Grandma Martha hadn't been charged with grand fraud yet. Her lawyers were claiming she was an innocent elderly mother who was manipulated by Sebastian and Vanessa. She was currently staying at her lavish suburban house, putting on a show of grief for the local press, pretending she was a heartbroken victim who had been tricked by her own daughter. She knew, Dad, I said firmly. Remember the video from the living room? She was helping them swap the body. She wasn't on it from day one. In fact, she was the one who suggested hiding the fake debt in your name because she always hated you. Dad's jaw tightened. She called me a common street dog the day I proposed to Vanessa. I gave that woman $10,000 of my own savings 3 years ago when she said she needed hip surgery, which she spent on a trip to Paris with her friends. I added bitterly. She never had hip surgery. Dad stood up, taking his coat off the rack. Where are you going, Dad? I asked. To see Martha, Dad said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a terrifying weight. I'm going to take back everything she stole from us. Martha's large, brick suburban home smelled of expensive lilies and old perfume. When Dad and I shoved open the front door, using the key Dad still possessed from years of doing her home repairs, we found Martha sitting in her velvet armchair, surrounded by 3 high-priced defense lawyers. When she saw us walk into the parlor, Martha jumped up, her frail, helpless act dissolving in an instant. Robert, how dare you enter my house without knocking? She snapped, pulling her silk shawl around her shoulders. Get out before I call the police. Call them, Dad said, strolling into the center of the room and putting his hands in his pockets. He looked around at the mahogany furniture, the crystal chandeliers, and the oil paintings hanging on the walls. Tell them the man who paid for half this furniture is standing in your living room. What are you talking about, you ungrateful idiot? Martha shrieked. I am a grieving mother. My daughter is in jail because of your insane obsession with revenge. One of the lawyers stepped forward, trying to interpose himself. Mr. Vance, I advise you to leave. Mrs. Vance is under severe emotional distress. Shut up, Dad said to the lawyer. He didn't yell. He just pointed a single finger at the man's chest with such sheer, terrifying authority that the lawyer actually stepped back and went quiet. Dad turned back to Martha. 10 years ago, when your husband died, you were broke, Dad said slowly, walking around her armchair like a predator circling its prey. I paid off your mortgage arrears. I paid $30,000 to keep this house from being auctioned off by the city. I did it because I thought you were my family. I did it because Vanessa begged me to. You did it because it was your duty. Martha sneered, her eyes glittering with malice. You were lucky my daughter even looked at you, a low-class peasant like. You should have felt honored to spend her pocket change on us. Is that so? I spoke up, pulling a stack of legal documents out of my backpack. Well, Grandma, we did some digging into the deed of this house. Martha's eyes darted toward me, a sudden flash of panic crossing her wrinkled face. When my dad paid off your mortgage arrears, I continued, holding up a yellowed contract. He didn't just give you a gift. He signed a co-equity agreement drawn up by his accountant. He owns 40% of the title to this house, plus Interest accrued over a decade. That's fake, Martha yelled. I never signed anything. Your signature is notarized right here on page 4. Arthur Pendleton, R. Lawyer, said as he walked in through the front door behind us, carrying a leather briefcase. And given that you are currently implicated as an unindicted co-conspirator in a federal wire fraud case involving your daughter, we have filed an emergency petition with the county sheriff to seize this property for asset liquidation. Martha's mouth dropped open. She looked at her lawyers, frantic. Is this true? Can they do this? Her lead lawyer looked down at his shoes, sighing heavily. Mrs. Vance, if Mr. Vance files a partition lawsuit with a fraud attachment, the court will order an immediate foreclosure sale. You will be evicted within 48 hours. Evicted? Martha gasped, clutching her chest. This is my home. You can't put an old woman out on the street. You were perfectly happy to put me and Ethan out on the street, Dad said, stepping right up to her, looking down into her pale, trembling face.
You
watched me work myself into an early grave, knowing every cent was going to your daughter's secret lover. You don't get to live in luxury off my sweat anymore. Martha. Robert, please. Martha collapsed back into her armchair, tears finally bursting from her eyes, real tears of terror, not the fake grief she had performed for the press. I'm your mother-in-law. I'm Ethan's grandmother. My grandmother died the day she helped swap my mother's body for a sack of sand, I said coldly. Dad looked at the lawyers. You have until 6 o'clock tomorrow evening to pack her personal clothes. At 6:01 p.m., the locks are being changed and the auction signs go up on the lawn. Dad turned and walked toward the door. I followed right behind him. Behind us, Martha's frantic, ugly screams filled the mansion, echoing off the mahogany walls she was about to lose forever. With Sebastian Thorne, Vanessa Vance, and Dr. Strolling sitting in county jail, awaiting trial without bail, the grand jury indictment came down like a hammer. Charges: federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit grand larceny, tampering with evidence, falsification of medical records, and forgery. Because the case was so high-profile, the district attorney offered no plea bargains. Sebastian was looking at 25 years in federal prison. Vanessa was looking at 20. Dr. Strolling was looking at 15. When rats are trapped in a cage with no way out, they don't cooperate, they eat each other. 2 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, Detective Miller invited Dad and me down to the precinct to observe an interrogation. Behind the two-way glass of the interrogation room, Sebastian Thorne sat wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed to the steel table. His high-end hair was gone, shaved short by prison barbers, and he looked thin, haggard, and utterly defeated. Across from him sat Vanessa, also in orange, her hair limp and unwashed, her face pale and lined with stress. They were allowed a 5-minute face-to-face meeting with their defense lawyers, present to discuss joint defense strategies. Instead, it devolved into pure, unadulterated venom. This is all your fault, you stupid bitch. Sebastian snarled, slamming his cuffed hands onto the table. If you hadn't panicked when your brat asked for an autopsy, none of this would have happened. My fault. Vanessa shrieked, leaning across the table, her fingernails clawing at the air. You were the one who bought a cheap plastic mannequin. You were the one who hired that incompetent Dr. Strolling. You promised me a mansion in Nassau. Now I'm going to rot in a cell for 20 years because of your bankrupt company. You came to me, Sebastian roared back. You were sick of your pathetic husband and begged me to take you away. You stole his money. You signed his name on the loan documents. I was just helping you spend it. I loved you. Vanessa wept wildly. I gave up my family for you. Loved me. Sebastian laughed, a dry, cruel, pathetic sound. You didn't love
me.
You love my sports cars. You're a hollow, selfish parasite, Vanessa.
And I
hope you rot in a maximum security cell until you're an old hag. You bastard, Vanessa screamed, lunging across the table and scratching her nails down Sebastian's cheek, drawing long streaks of blood before 4 guards tackled her to the floor. Behind the two-way mirror, my dad stood silently, watching the two people who had destroyed his past life claw at each other like rabid dogs. There was no sadness in my dad's eyes anymore.
No longing. No grief.
Just a deep, profound sense of disgust. Satisfied, Mr. Vance? Detective Miller asked softly from behind us. Dad adjusted his jacket, turning his back on the glass. They deserve every second, Dad said. He looked at me, a warm, genuine smile. breaking across his face for the first time in months. Come on, Ethan. We have a college application to finish. 6 months later, the spring sun was bright and warm, casting golden light across the stone arches of the university campus. The smell of blooming jasmine hung sweet in the air. I stood on the grassy quad, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, carrying a heavy stack of textbooks under my arm. In my past life, this day never existed. On this day in my past life, I was waking up at 4:30 a.m. to work a double shift at a greasy diner, my hands raw from hot dishwater, my shoulders aching, spending every dollar I earned to pay off the interest on my mother's fake cancer bills. Now, I look down at the acceptance letter sticking out of my backpack. Department of Computer Science and Business Finance, full merit scholarship. Ethan, a voice called out across the lawn. I turned around. My dad was walking toward me, wearing a sharp, tailored gray suit. He looked 10 years younger. The dark circles under his eyes were completely gone. His shoulders were broad and straight. His posture was filled with quiet, easy confidence. After liquidating Martha's mansion and recovering our stolen assets from Sebastian's seized accounts, my dad had started his own independent accounting firm. Free from the toxic weight of Vanessa and her family, his business had
Thrived.
He already had 12 full-time clients and an office downtown. How was your first morning class? Dad asked, putting a hand on my shoulder as we walked together toward the campus cafe. Brilliant, I smiled. The professor is starting us on advanced financial algorithm modeling next week. Good, Dad chuckled. Maybe you can help me audit my firm's quarterly taxes. We sat down at an outdoor table under the shade of an oak tree, drinking iced coffees in the quiet warmth of the afternoon. I got a letter from the district attorney's office this morning, Dad said, taking a sip of his drink. Oh. I leaned in. Final sentencing? Dad nodded. Sebastian got 22 years without parole. Vanessa got 18. Dr. Sterling lost her license permanently and got 12 years in state prison. And Grandma Martha? Her foreclosure was finalized last week, Dad said calmly. She couldn't afford her legal fees, so she had to move into a tiny, state-funded retirement apartment in the outer suburbs. None of her old high society friends will speak to her. She's completely alone. I took a long drink of my coffee, feeling the cool liquid wash down my throat. Justice had been delivered. Every single person who had taken part in ruining our past lives had been crushed beneath the wheels of their own greed. The fire of hatred that had burned in my chest since the moment I woke up in the hospital ward was finally gone, replaced by a deep, quiet peace. My dad looked out over the bustling college campus, watching students laughing, studying, and walking under the trees. He turned his head and looked at me, his eyes shining with pure pride. You saved us, Ethan, Dad whispered softly. I don't know how. I don't know why you were so sharp, so brave on that awful day in the hospital.
But you saved
my life. You gave me my son back. I looked at my dad, the man who had worked himself to death in another life, the man who had been murdered in cold blood at a theme park just for discovering the
truth.
I reached across the table and squeezed his hand tight. You gave me everything, Dad, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I was just making sure you got it back. The autumn leaves fell around us in the warm breeze. The dark nightmare of the past was gone, buried beneath the soil where it belonged. Ahead of us lay only the bright, unbroken dawn of the life we had earned.